Zhang Ailing's Little Reunion Text Chapter 1. On the morning of the big exam, the bleak mood can only be compared to the dawn before the army goes into battle. Like the slave rebels in Spartacus watching the Roman army in formation in the morning fog. It is the most terrifying of all war movies, one scene, because it was all about waiting. When Julie was almost 30 years old, she wrote in her notebook, "The sound of rain is gurgling, like living by the stream. I would rather rain every day, thinking that you can't come because of the rain. On the day of my 30th birthday, I saw the moonlight on the balcony in bed at night. The cement railing lay there like a collapsed stone tablet, bathed in the blue moonlight of the late Tang dynasty. The moonlight was more than 1,000 years ago, but it was too much in her 30 years, and it weighed heavily on her heart like a tombstone. But she often thought that getting old would at least have one benefit. She no longer had to take exams, but she still dreamed about taking exams, which was always a nightmare. The alarm clock has gone off, and the toilet is rumbling far and near. BB and his classmates are asking and answering each other on the pillow across the board wall, and they are giving oral examinations. The voice of asking questions is very natural, but when it is his turn to answer, it immediately becomes thin. The sad little voice announced the names of the bones, one by one, which was unbearable to hear. BB repeated the grade last year. Julie washed her face and returned to her small room. She had forgotten to turn off the desk lamp just now. The small B-shaped desk lamp was on the windowsill. The milky yellow spherical glass cover was still on, reflecting on the light gray-blue sea in the early morning. Somehow there was something there, a weird feeling, as if she had been pricked by a needle. She immediately went to put out the lamp. Her mother was a school addict, and in their day there were middle-aged women attending primary school. After studying the regulations of this place thoroughly, the only lamp provided in the dormitory was a desk lamp. I bought one for her at Xianxi Company for 3 yuan. I was willing to risk breaking it and put it in a box and brought it with me. It was not possible to go abroad for the European War, so she had to change to Hong Kong. The Hong Kong dollars were 3 to 1. Julie also felt that the money was not worth spending. In fact, the free money has already been spent. The most expensive thing is a year of makeup lessons, which are taught by the invigilators of the 3 joint examinations in London, Oxford and Cambridge. Of course, it is horrifyingly expensive. I'm going down first. She pushed open the Western-style wine grill half-shutter door and said to Bibi, "When did you go to bed last night?" "I went to bed early. At least I was clear-headed." Bibi dug around in his sleeping bag. Her family had lived in Hong Kong and knew that the climate was subtropical. But she still sent a sleeping bag because her mother was afraid that she would take off the quilt in her sleep and catch a cold. She took out a lamp from her sleeping bag and lit it brightly. "Are you reading under the covers?" Julie didn't understand. There was no lights out order in the dormitory here. "No. It was cold last night. Use it as a hot water bottle. Mommy is going to dance," she said with a smile, extinguished the lamp, and still leaned upside down on the iron railing at the head of the bed. "Are you ready?" Julie shook her head and said, "I don't even have all the notes." "Are you telling the truth, or just saying that?" "Really?" When she saw the frightened smile on BB's face, she immediately said lightly, "You will probably pass if you pass." But BB knew that she was not qualified. "I'm going down first." She went downstairs with a pen, ink bottle, and notebook. In the school where the big rubber prince's daughter went, she was the only one who didn't have a fountain pen. She always brought a bottle of ink with her, and she attracted a lot of attention. The nuns who manage the dormitory are saying mass. There is half a chapel in the reception room. On the stairs, you can hear the murmur of Latin in unison, which makes people feel calm, like a shallow water, as slippery as oil. The heart that was churning before vomiting was sealed, and it made me want to vomit even more. The nun's strong cocoa tea was simmered and waiting, and a strong aroma emanated from the doorway of the small kitchen. She quickened her pace and ran down the small cement staircase. The cafeteria is in the basement. There were so many people today. I was shocked when I walked in. Several long tables with pink fake marble imitating medieval monasteries were almost full. Local students can study day to day, but some girls still live in dormitories, where the environment is quiet and suitable for studying. The family was so lively, each had 5 or 6 mothers, and they all looked like sisters, just like the big businessmen in Hong Kong. My daughter has been taken home for 3 days and 2 days, not just on weekends, but today they are all here, all in bloom and noisy. Mr. and Juicy said, a few Guangdong girls make more noise than dozens of northern students. Julie felt like she had been pricked by a needle. Die. Silly sat on the chair and bounced, her eyebrow-length curly hair bouncing along with it. She was wearing the latest golden wide-striped plastic headband and a light pink thin woolen cheongsam, printed with a sky blue puppy and a parachute. She is not small and has well-developed breasts, but she is childish. I'm going to die today. How are you? Elizabeth, I'm waiting to kill you. Death, death, death was shouted. 2 overseas Chinese first-year students from Penang also frowned and shouted, die, die. One was twirling the small gold cross hanging on his chest, twisting it around, and the other was so anxious that he threw his hands round. But they couldn't scream as loudly as the girls in Hong Kong. Loud and without sincerity, people will not misunderstand that they are really serious. Hey, Emma, tell me something about 1848. They said on Juicy likes to ask about 1848, Sally said. Julie pricked the needle again. The basement is actually the ground floor. The weather was humid, and the stone foundations of the houses on the mountain were so high that each one stood on a rockery. Even so, the ground floor is still unoccupied and used as a car park. The workshop was renovated and turned into a canteen, with the row of doors wide open, facing the sea. Julie put the ink bottles and other items on a table, then took a seat facing the sea and sat down. After a good meal, at least you have the strength to write the exam papers. Everyone is given a blue exercise book. She always had to pick up 2 more books. She kept waving her hands and writing in 3 books, and the knuckles of her little fingers were worn out. She could memorize the entire book of Paradise Lost for the English test, but no one could memorize it more than the Chinese. However, foreigners do not advocate endorsement. If you want to endorse, you must have an excuse and give a reason. I have to force the professor to give me grades that he has never given me, and I feel really sorry for him not to give them. But what is on the paper today? The prisoners on death row had their last meal and were taken to the execution ground on a sunny day, so there were many people watching. While eating, Wei Jui bent over and read a big book on her lap. She is from Shanghai, but only English and Cantonese are the common languages here. People from the mainland also avoid speaking Mandarin or Shanghai's in public, as if they have something to hide, which is rude. Julie only knew her surname was Sun, but did not know her Chinese name. As soon as she looked up and saw Julie, she said, "Where is Baby? I'll probably be up as soon as I get down." "We won't wait for anyone today," Wu Jin said sternly. Her pretty triangular face had a pair of squinty eyes. Her temples were high and combed. "Is the car guy here?" someone asked. "Are you?" Bai hurriedly walked in, hesitated for a moment, and then sat down at the table. Everyone knows that she avoids sitting at the same table as Ji and Ni. The 2 transfer students from mainland China did not talk to each other. Julie only knows their English names. B's hair is cut very short. Her face is like a full moon, and she is white and rosy. She wears gold-rimmed glasses, has a fat figure, and often wears a 2 blue cloth cheongsam. Jenny is from the northwest. She has 2 pigtails and a handsome oval face. Her pale skin reminds people of wind and sand blowing against her face. She is also wearing a 2 blue cloth robe. However, after coming here for a few months, she bought a red, white, salt and pepper robe. He wore his blue woolen coat indoors and didn't take it off even when eating. He smiled sarcastically and said, "Wearing this coat makes you look like a student of Victoria University. If you don't wear this coat, you don't look like a student of Victoria University." Soon, the coat also emits a strong smell of garlic, which can be smelled even when it is hung on a clothes hook. The source is very mysterious. Although the dishes cooked by the nuns are French country dishes, they take into account the taboos of most people and do not use garlic. Jianni never buys anything to eat by herself. Although she was frugal and ordered a newspaper herself, the only English version in her dormitory was the South China Morning Post. Ryubai also subscribed to a newspaper and was eager to read it every day. When she came back from school, Jeannie sometimes slaps the table, jumps up and kicks on the chair, slaps her knees and laughs loudly. She doesn't know whether it was lost or recovered somewhere. Listening to the place name, it feels like she has hit Hunan. Her movements and sounds sounded like those of some old gentleman. She often said that her father wanted her to study hard in this quiet environment, perhaps because of her father's influence. One day after school, Julie and Bibi were too lazy to go upstairs and waited in the cafeteria for dinner. Therese, a Cantonese nun, is ironing clothes while holding an ironing board. Bibi put the calico teapot cotton cover on her head, pretending to be a Napoleonic military hat, pointed her finger at Therese, and sang the opera written by Gilbert and composed by Sullivan, Bold Little Bitch. Wait a moment for your delusional marriage. Refrain, audacious tart. Your suit from Ressing. Original pun. She was not allowed to iron her clothes, and was forcing her to go upstairs to light the gas stove on the bathtub to boil water. Therese urged her to call her a BB, in addition to Mary, the girl sent by the monastery from the orphanage to do chores. She called her Emily, chattering in a low voice. Toby asked Ryubai she was asked to wash and iron them, and she earned $2 of her own money, which she used to buy pictures of icons and materials to make a cloak for a small statue of the Virgin. She is tall and slender, has a yellow face, and wears black-rimmed glasses. Bibi told Julie that she collected many pictures. She's happy, Bibi said defensively. She knows that everything is taken care of and she doesn't have to worry. It's not easy to enter the monastery. You have to pay a dowry first. They are marrying Jesus. She urged Bibi to interrogate Ruby on the spot, but finally went upstairs to ask Aunt Henry for the key to boil the bath water. Bibi followed suit. Julie was reading a novel and accidentally glanced at Gianni's newspaper. She smiled and gave one to her and pushed it over. Julie was a little embarrassed and smiled, as if she was boasting. I don't read newspapers. I only read movie advertisements. Gianni smiled and remained silent. In the silence, only a sharp voice in French could be heard shouting at Therese from upstairs. The cafeteria is large, the lights are dim, and the dining table is piled with newspapers. Gianni folded it, picked up the wrong one, looked at it, and suddenly said, "This is a traitor report." She grabbed it and tore it apart. Ruby stood up and stretched out her heavy arms across the table. The sleeves of her blue coat reached the elbows. Although the clothes were wide, one could see her bulging chest. The two of them were tossing a newspaper back and forth, but after all, Ryubai was a step too slow and had already torn it into two halves. Julie was also a step too slow and sat next to her. Things happened so fast that she didn't have time to absorb them. She couldn't even say what she said. I only heard it after talking for a while, just like hearing thunder after a beat after lightning. You are not allowed to slander the peace movement. Ryubai's slightly hoarse masculine voice sounded very surprised. His Mandarin is good, but he sounds like he's from another province. She probably doesn't speak much, and her voice is very low when most people speak foreign languages. Traitor reports. It's all nonsense. It's my revenge. You dare to tear it apart. Gianni's willow eyebrows stood up. She folded it in half, and then tore it apart. It was thicker, but she couldn't tear it apart for a while, and was torn off half by Ryubai. Gianni was still tearing the remaining half, and Ryubai seemed to be about to hit someone. After a slight hesitation, he picked up a newspaper into handfuls and carried it away. Julie told Bibi about this scene, and Bibi spread the word. Soon Yasui got the news again, saying that Ryubai was Wang Jingwei's niece, and everyone suddenly realized. In Hong Kong, Wang Jingwei's nieces are far less important than those of Sir Robert Ho Tung, of whom there are two in the school, but Wu Jui is from Shanghai and has a different perspective. Ruby often went to her room to play. One day Julie walked past the door of Wei Jui's room and saw Ruby wrestling with Sally on her bed. Ruby is a bit boyish and likes wrestling. These small rooms separated by wooden walls are one light and two dark, and there is a dark room in the dark, so the half door of Liangshan is often raised to make it brighter and more breathable. When Julie walked by late at night, she always saw Wu Jui working on a book. holding a skeleton in one hand. She was like a football player who never leaves her hand with the ball, mumbling something. She was wearing a sapphire blue satin cotton bathrobe with her hair down, in the shadow of the lamp. Behind her there is a skull specimen standing there, looking like a witch. Jenny has a fellow countryman who often comes to see her. He wears a suit, is dark and thin, and wears black-rimmed glasses. His face makes people immediately forget to look elsewhere, as if to be polite, as if he is looking at a disabled person without any interest people. Jenny said he was her father's friend. One time after he went there, Aunt Henry joked and asked, "Jenny's Mr. Wei is gone." Jenny looked back upstairs and smiled and said, "Mr. Wei is married, Nanny." Aunt Henry still calls him Jenny's Mr. Wei. In addition, there is only the graceful Mr. Lee, and the graceful Mr. Lee is almost engaged to a classmate. Jenny went to live with Wei's family for a few weeks, temporarily studying on a day trip. She explained that Mr. Wei's parents were both in Hong Kong, and the old couple liked her very much. They cooked local dishes for her and spoiled her. I don't know if their wife didn't come out or if she went back. The waiter picked her up after a while and Jenny was very popular in the dormitory, so no one said anything. After living there for a month, I felt a little embarrassed and said, "I'm getting fat from eating local food." Bibi only said, people from the same hometown are very important to her. Although the Northwest is far away, the implication is that she is from a small place. Julie smiled and said, "She looks exactly like the person in Zhang Henshui's novel, with pigtails and a blue cheongsam." Bibi grew up in China and watched a lot of domestic films and local operas, so she nodded and smiled. The heroine in Zhang Henshui's novel feels a little uneasy when she lives in the Wei family, since Mr. Wei looks like that. I'm afraid there is a conspiracy. The nuns don't know what to think either, and Henry made fun of Jenny's Mr. Wei as usual. Hong Kong people originally regarded Northerners as outsiders, and they were not their Catholics, so they had little control over them. Moreover, they were family friends, and living outside, after all, saved a few cents in food expenses for the dormitory. And he was as popular as the local girls who came home for a few days. Only Julie didn't even go back during the summer vacation to save a lot of travel expenses. Last year, and Luke told her that the dormitory could not be open for her alone. She could take her back to the monastery and teach 2 English classes in the monastery, and provide board and accommodation. Of course, it was also because her score broke the record, but she was still a great person. Before moving to the monastery, one afternoon, Aunt Henry shouted from downstairs, "Julie, there is a visitor coming to see you." Aunt Henry was accompanying her, leaning against the iron railing outside the cafeteria to talk. It turned out to be her mother. She also followed him and called her uncle and aunt, instead of Uncle Mom and Dad. Aunt Henry knew that her parents were divorced, but Catholicism did not recognize divorce, so she did not call her Mrs. Chang, nor did she call her Miss. There was no title. In the sunshine at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, her mother looked a little haggard, and Julie was surprised. Maybe it's because of the change in hairstyle, but her hairy hair is curled up at the back, making her look thinner. Probably because he came to her school dormitory and dressed more simply, a light green linen shirt and a white canvas trumpet tube long hakama. She is a hard student here, and Henry also seemed calm. She was always very proud of her mother when she came to her school. Even the dean of the school, Ms. Chang, smiled and found something to say when she had nothing to say. In addition, they only invited an old gentleman and a Mr. Liu. There was a gymnastics class that day. On the campus, there were about 10 girls from 7 to 8 years old. Mr. Liu didn't change his clothes. He only put on black stockings on a yellow wicker robe, hung a whistle on his chest, and had his hair cut, shoulder length, with sparse bangs in front, a long and delicate face, a petite figure, holding a whistle in one hand, walking in place. Visiting on the side, I stood a little too close, which was a bit embarrassing. Mr. Liu didn't come over to socialize after class. When Julie went back, he asked questions at the cigarette shop several times and asked with a smile whether Mr. Liu was married. It is true that her mother is much more common in Hong Kong because she looks like a Cantonese hybrid. Anne Henry is the so-called Macau native. She is of mixed Chinese and Portuguese descent. She has big dark eyes with long eyelashes. She walks slowly and has gained weight since middle age due to racial discrimination. I only sit third in the dormitory. She led the way in to visit. The cafeteria was empty during the summer vacation and seemed much smaller. Julie was very sorry that no one was there and her mother was not seen come up and have a look, said Aunt Henry, but she did not go upstairs together, presumably leaving them alone to talk. Julie didn't ask what day she arrived. It has been 2 days. Asking is like saying that she was not notified earlier. I came here with Miss Xiangba and the others, Ruiqiu said. We also talked about it at the card table, saying that we should go together. Nancy and the others are also leaving. Miss Xiangba is here to have fun. We all agreed to go together. Okay, I said yes, smiled helplessly. Julie didn't ask where she was going. Of course she was passing by Hong Kong. Miss Xiangba may just come to Hong Kong for fun. Nancy and his wife didn't know whether they were going to Chongqing. Many people are leaving, but before Shanghai became an isolated island, Ruiqiu was already making noises about I can't move even if I'm stuck here. Julie herself was one of the reasons why she had muddy feet. Now she finally laughed. European war. Where can she go? Woolen cloth. That fact is, even if I asked, I might not tell her, because later it seemed that not all the people who came with her knew Ruiqiu's destination, and they were afraid that she would accidentally say it out loud if he told her. Upstairs, Ruiqiu just looked at the door of the room and said, "Okay, I have to go somewhere else. And I thought I would stop by to take a look at your dormitory." Julie didn't ask about third aunt either, making it look as white as old blue linen soaked with sweat. "Okay, then come tomorrow. Can you take the bus?" Ruiqiu said to Julie in English. Grandma Henry suddenly remembered and asked, "Where do you live?" Ruiqiu paused and said, "Repulse Bay Hotel." "Well, that's a nice place," replied Aunt Henry. Both of them were confused, but Julie was very embarrassed next to her. Knowing that it was the most expensive hotel in Hong Kong, she would pretend to be poor, take advantage of the monastery, and live in the monastery for a whole summer. The three of them continued walking down. "Why are you here?" Aunt Henry asked in conversation. "A friend's car brought me here," Ruiqiu said quickly and softly, looking away, in a tone of not mentioning it. When Grandma Henry heard this, she stopped and did not send it down any further. Julie was afraid of going up with Grandma Henry, knowing that she would never say anything to her, but it seemed appropriate to take a few extra steps, so she continued to follow. But further down, you can see the road. The car is parked here and cannot be seen, but there is a car across the street. Maybe it belongs to the house opposite. She also stopped, fearing that Aunt Henry would see her walking very slowly and deliberately avoid her. Fortunately, Aunt Henry is gone. It's a lot like a long, narrow dictionary, but a little too long. When I picked it up and looked at it, I saw that the yellow paper underneath was torn and old stamps were exposed. I was shocked. Aunt Therese came in and said, "Is it yours? I'm waiting for the signature." She still understood these 2 sentences in Cantonese. A little old man came in outside the row door. I have never seen such a shabby postman in Hong Kong. He is not a man in green. He cannot be recognized by any uniform except for the large off-white mailbag on his shoulder. After he left and there was no one around, Julie patiently opened a large stack of banknotes inside the hemp rope. There was a letter. Look at the signature at the end. It wasn't juicy. He called her Miss Chang and said that he knew she had applied for a scholarship but had not received it. So please allow him to give her a small scholarship. If she can maintain such results next year, she will definitely get a full free scholarship. I counted 800 Hong Kong dollars and many tattered $5 bills. I don't write a check just because I'm afraid it will get out and someone gossips about me. In her letter was a license to live, and she couldn't wait to show it to her mother. Fortunately, she was originally asked to go today. Otherwise, the key would have to be held for a day or 2. How could she survive it? I couldn't explain it clearly on the phone. My heart was shaking, and I flew in front of the bus. There was a colorful flag on the front of the bus, waving in the air. When I arrived at Repulse Bay, I told Ruikyu first and then showed her the letter. The parcel was wrapped as it was and placed on the table, like a bar of yellow soap for washing clothes. Julie became anxious. No, Mr. Onjusi is not that kind of person. If you want to make him angry, then you will think of me. As if I misunderstood, he murmured. He added, we have no contact at all except in class. He doesn't like me either. Ruikyu remained silent, and after a while she muttered, let's leave it here first. Julie folded the letter again, put it in an envelope, and put it in her purse. She didn't know if she looked suspicious again, as if she had fallen in love with Onjusi. The bar of yellow laundry soap was lying on the table. It was too big and too eye-catching, but she walked around without even looking at it. I thought that if I held back the good news and didn't tell it, I wouldn't be able to get through those days or two. I really didn't know how to spend the 2 days after I got back. She knew she wouldn't mention it right away. After having afternoon tea as usual, Nancy came. Nancy has a yellow face, and her skin is best suited for sunbathing. She has always been exposed to the sun on the beach, and many people cannot show it. Hey, you lost a lot yesterday, right? She asked. Hey, Mr. Bai was the only one who was lucky yesterday. Ruikyu put it aside again. When did you come back? We came back early, before 2 o'clock. I asked to come over and take a look. Charlie said he was tired. What? You said you lost 800 yuan. Nancy smiled curiously. Julie didn't pay attention at first, but she felt it was a bit strange. Ruikyu seemed to be stopping her to stop her from talking, so she changed her mind again and never answered the question. There was no response in my ears when I heard that number. I was completely dumbfounded. After Nancy left, Ruikyu didn't mention repaying Onjusi's money. Not to mention the best. She just felt that she had passed the test by luck, and she didn't understand it until she was on the bus on the way back. Later in Shanghai, she once wrote something. Of course her uncle's family knew it was about them, and they were so angry that they stopped communicating with her. Her third aunt smiled and said, second aunt will be angry when she comes back. Julie said, I don't care about what second aunt thinks. She told Chudi about the 800 yuan incident. Ever since that time, I don't know why. I just don't care anymore, Ji said with an English word between her fingers. Chudi was silent for a while, then smiled and said, she spent a lot of money on you. She knew Chudi thought she was just for 800 Hong Kong dollars. She only said, I must repay second aunt's money no matter what. Chudi was silent for another moment and said with a smile, Miss Xiangba said it. It's not good to scold her every day. It was like a second honeymoon. The first time was when Ruikyu returned to China for the first time when she was a child. In Hong Kong, she resumed her status as a little guest, always coming at 4 or 5 o'clock for afternoon tea. I haven't seen her wearing inappropriate clothes, but this time there are quite a few. It seems that she has become disorganized when she is haggard. Who opened the door and brought tea in? She had already hid in the bathroom. She poured 2 cups of tea from the tall, thin silver teapot. Your friend Bibi. I asked her to come for tea, she called. So I made an appointment with her. It means that Bibi is going back for summer vacation this time. People are capable. She can help you, but don't let her control you. That's not good. The last 3 words were spoken in a low voice, and her thin lips pursed a little. Julie knew it meant same-sex love. I used to often hear my third aunt talking about how some girlfriends were so good. That one was completely at the mercy of the other. Her uncle often teased her second aunt and her third aunt for having same-sex love. Anyway, her own affairs are always beautiful and noble. And no matter what others do, they immediately think of the worst side. The ugly little heron is just ugly. Angie, a mixed-race girl who was a day student, happened to take the bus from their dormitory down the mountain that day. She was crowded in the car and sat next to Julie. Later Sally said to Julie, Angie said you are beautiful. I don't agree, but I think I should tell you. Julie knew Sally was lacking self-confidence, so she felt she should tell her. But perhaps due to the influence of the movie, she is also among the school beauties. Sally didn't know if she had told Bibi. Bibi didn't say anything, and Julie certainly didn't mention it either. After that, I always felt a little embarrassed when I saw NG. Bibi never calls people beautiful or ugly, but every time Julia says, "I like the name Katinka," she always said, "I know a girl named Katinka." Obviously this girl is ugly and her impression of this name is also spoiled. "I like the name Nora," Julie said again. "I know a girl named Nora," she explained why the name turned her back. Julie found that there were many people in English novels who looked like her mother. She told Bibi that the mother Florence Rose in Coward's Play The Whirlpool was similar to the mother Mary Amberley in Huxley's novel. Bibi asked, "Did she really have sex with someone?" "No. She just wants people to like her." Bibi immediately lost interest. After afternoon tea, Ruikyu went to put on makeup and get dressed. Miss Xiangba is here. Julie calls her 8th sister. She is younger, but actually belongs to the previous generation. 2 years ago, Ruikyu met her when she went out to play cards. She became a relative, although she was related to the Sheng family, and had no contact with her anymore. She was a divorcee, and she immediately became a confidant. I came to visit within a few days, had a long talk about the divorce, and frankly admitted that I wanted to get married again. She has very little money and has a 17-year-old son with her. After she left, Ruikyu shouted "Chude" in the bathroom. Julie already knew that she and third aunt were not at odds, since she came to live with them. But when she told her what she had just said in the bathroom late that night, it was still the same as before close. Julie had already fallen asleep and was surprised to hear this. "Anyway, divorced people think they are the same," Chudadai complained. "Hey," a shy and warm laugh. "Their Gong family is really... Hey, those young men in their family say they don't dare to wander into other rooms. As long as there is no one in any room, you will bump into someone in it." Blue sky and white sun. When Miss Xiangba was the 4th young lady of the Gong family, she was a famous beauty among relatives. At that time, she had a powder puff face and a high nose. Now I'm a little fatter, I have a double chin, and I have the hairstyle of George Washington, the founding father of the United States. After not seeing each other for a year, she greeted Julie without any fuss, and said directly to Ruikyu, "I just came to ask you how you are doing today." She meant not to confuse their conversation. "Sit for a while, Julie is leaving." "I'm not going to sit down. How are you today? Are you going to have dinner with us, or have a date with friends?" Daphne raised his eyelids with an impatient look on his face, and his throat became thick. Ruikyu paused and then said, "Let's talk about it later. Anyway, we'll talk about it later when we meet at the bar. It's the same old days." "Okay," Miss Xiangba said angrily. "Then I'll leave first. I'll see you later." Miss Xiangba sometimes speaks like that because she was influenced by the concubines at home. Since she was a child, Chang San Tang Zixing has this kind of coquettishness and anger, which is used to manipulate people. But doing this like today is too much. Is it because it is difficult for her to come to Hong Kong for fun, and why others don't accompany her? Julie didn't ask Ruikyu how long she planned to stay in Hong Kong. After a few weeks, I didn't hear any mention of leaving, and it became a bit strange. One day before she left, Ruikyu went down with her. The clothing store and antique store downstairs of the hotel was in a T-shaped short alley, with a dome-shaped glass roof. Ruikyu was looking at the display window when someone came out of the alley. They both smiled and said hey. It was Miss Xiangba and Mr. Bai. It turns out that Ambassador Bai is also in Hong Kong and must have come together. Mr. Bai, "Hey, Julie. We are also looking at the display window," Miss Xiangba said with a smile. "Of course what's here is tiger meat. It's okay to buy it here," Ruikyu said. There seemed to be a moment of silence. Miss Xiangba struck up a conversation and asked, "Where are you going?" Ruikyu murmured and replied casually, "I'm not going anywhere. Just go out for a walk." The two of them whispered to each other, and Miss Xiangba smiled and raised her hand to straighten Ambassador B's tie. He is in his 60s or 70s, but his back is still straight. His hair is as bald as a moonhole, and his forehead looks particularly high. He wears tortoiseshell-rimmed glasses, has a crab shell face, and has no smile on his face. Julie was shocked when she saw that possessive little move. She was careful not to have any expression on her face. She turned her head and glanced at her mother. Seeing Ruikyu, she pretended not to see it and was looking at the display window again. The semi-dark glass reflecting her face. The color was clear, and she was very beautiful at that moment. Looking in faintly, she had an affectionate look. Only then did Julie vaguely realize that Miss Xiangbao was so angry that time, probably because Ruikyu always had another date. Leaving her, Ambassador Bai, and the Nangxi couple, who always left her with Mr. Bai together. Don't blame her for snatching Mr. Bai away later. Then let's meet at the bar, Miss Xiangbao said. Everyone nodded and smiled and walked away. Julie was about to say, I'm going back. Ruikyu said, go out for a walk. The garden here is very nice. Julie was surprised that she really wanted to go for a walk with her. It was probably a square garden in the style of a French palace, with holly trees pruned into vase-like shapes along the paths, and the floor imitated by white stones. There were a few roses in full bloom. It was very strange to walk side by side with her mother. Ruikyu may also feel this strange, and suddenly she starts talking about her childhood, which was something Julie often talked about after lunch when she was 8 or 9 years old. It's like that time in the past. Your grandpa was absent during his tenure in Yunnan. He was only 24 years old. He was the miasma in Yunnan. The news came home. Grandma and my aunt are very happy. She always called her mother as her second aunt. These people don't believe it. They want to divide the family's property and have their bodies tested. How dare they ask them to test themselves? They make a huge fuss and say it's false. They want to drive them out and set fire to the house. Some of them are from the Hunan army. They used to be with the old man. When the month was coming, we surrounded the house, guarded the front and back doors, checked every entry and exit, and there were people watching on the roof. She was born a girl, and it was sister-in-law Ling who carried a basket out, and someone from Shandong came down to escape the famine. Yes, I bought a boy and put it in a basket and brought it in. He was considered a twin. Sister-in-law Ling was scared to death. If she started crying when she entered the door, why not catch her and beat her to death immediately? So she left her words when grandma was away. We must treat sister-in-law Ling differently and support her for the rest of her life. Your uncle is okay with this and has always been good to her. Julie was confused at first after hearing this. She was stunned for a moment and then said, does uncle know? He doesn't know, Ruikyu said softly, shaking her head. No wonder the third aunt once said that there are very few twins of one boy and one girl. Julie said, aren't the second aunt and uncle? After a moment of silence, Chu Defeng responded, hey, and smiled. The Ruikyu siblings are very similar. Chu Di also laughed when she said they looked alike. They are not as similar as twins, but it is said that twins with one boy and one girl are not real twins. They look like Yinwei is feeding on the second concubine's milk. She later realized that when he told her this, Yinwei needed to shorten the distance at the moment, so he told her a secret. And she was old enough that an 18-year-old could keep a secret. She remembered that there was a sister-in-law Ling in her uncle's house. She was old. Sometimes she would come to play at the old owner's house. She was dressed in a black linen woolen coat and hakama. She was very neat and fair. She had a round face and could not tell how old she was. Now that she thought about it, she must have been there in the past. She was very popular, flirting with these old Hunan soldiers guarding the door. Otherwise, why would she be allowed to go in with a basket and not be found? She was obviously very interested in this story, and Ruikyu immediately said, don't go to court with your uncle to fight for the family property. Julie raised her eyebrows and looked at her with a smile. How could I go to court with my uncle? I'm just saying this. Maybe if you really have no money, you will think of it one day. What happened to your Sheng family? Even your own brothers and sisters are still filing a lawsuit. I have already imagined how one day she will become a rogue and prove the story about a civet cat exchanging for a prince decades ago and rob her uncle of his nearly ruined family property. He walked around in silence and walked back. Julie finally smiled and said, I have always felt very uncomfortable. I have to bring up my second aunt. Do you know what will happen to me in the future? It is a pity that people like my second aunt have been buried in vain all these years. Ruokyu paused and said, I don't like what you said. I don't like you, full stop. Julie seemed to faintly hear her say, it seems that I am another class of people. Superior. My life is over. In fact, I have already thought about leaving some money left to provide to you. This sentence was lowered, and it was almost too fast. Cannot hear. I'll just find a place to go by myself. She didn't say anything further, but Julie guessed that she was referring to someone who had loved her for many years. Such as Lloyd, the British businessman, who was younger than her. Taller, with a red face and a long chin, blue eyes with drooping ends, and always talking. Halfway through, he started laughing. He couldn't hear clearly, and he looked a little silly. Once, Ruokyu Chudi was invited to watch his water polo match, and Julie was also brought there. The seats at the swimming pool of the West Youth League were very crowded. She remembered the summer dusk, the fishy smell of the water by the pool, the ruffles on Ruokyu's gray-blue gauze shirt, and Ruokyu's excited laughter. As soon as Ruokyu said she wanted to find a place to live, she saw a dark hall at that moment, with an old-style black hat stand, a mirror embedded in the middle of the two wings, and an umbrella underneath. For example, she lived in an unknown house when she was a child, but she was a little gassed. She stood in the hallway a little anxiously, but she had the security of childhood and returned to the status of a little guest forever. It was the dependence that Ruokyu hated most that was at work. Julie was careful not to look satisfied. It wasn't quite right to accept the news calmly, as if he didn't think she was a sacrifice. It was getting dark. Okay, you go back. You don't have to come tomorrow. I'll call you. The next time she went there, Ruokyu put on makeup in front of the mirror and mentioned Chude for the first time. Your third aunt has a letter. As soon as I left, she also had friends. It seems that I was the one who stopped her. What a, he chuckled angrily. Julie thought to herself that their relationship was so bad now, that they were forced to live together just to save money. But she still wanted people to miss her after she left, otherwise they would be really angry. She didn't ask who the third aunt's boyfriend was. After her mother came this time, she also received a letter from her third aunt. Obviously it hadn't been available at that time, but it was still in a very pleasant tone. Quoting Russell's words, a pessimist calls a glass half empty, and an optimist calls it half empty. Half full. I'm enjoying my half full life right now. Julie didn't like what she said, so she didn't answer the question in her reply. In her mind, the second aunt and the third aunt will always be like the first time she stood by and watched them change clothes and go out to dance when she was a child. Ruokyu was wearing a light pink knee-length shirt with rhinestone tassels all over the place, and Chudi was wearing black with a blue velvet flower on her waist. Rose, long dress. She is fair and voluptuous, with a small nose with a knot, but a bit of buck teeth, and wears glasses. In fact, even at that time, they were no longer young in the eyes of children. The sunset is always beautiful, and the younger generation should also cherish it. Stand back, and don't rush to grow up. This is her way of respecting the elderly. Young people will have a long life in the future. This is what Ruokyu often said since childhood. But now it has become a kind of escape. Everything is in the future. During this meeting, Ruokyu seemed to have made up her mind not to correct her every move. That evening, I changed into my bathing suit and went downstairs, telling her to go to the beach too. Want her to see the world? She felt that her mother had given up on her, an act of desperation. Walking side by side, the white swimsuit was smeared in the eyes, and the breasts were too pointed, like fake ones. In the photos she took on the beach in the south of France, she always wore a lot of clothes. Long hakama, parrot green floral woolen sandals covering her insteps, and she had her feet bound. Isn't it necessary not to go into the water? Julie avoided looking at the white rubber soft-soled shoes on her feet. The legs of people with bound feet are thin and straight, which makes the shoes appear to be too big, and of course they are padded inside. After leaving the grove, there was a light red sandy beach with scattered footprints. A couple and their children were swimming in the water, and another family was playing beach ball. They are all Cantonese or Macau people. Only Julie was wearing a cheongsam, which was eye-catching enough. and she was wearing glasses, which Judy had urged her to wear before coming to Hong Kong. She always felt as if she was wearing gloves all over her body. Even the sun was shielding her from the sun. Look! Ruikyu nudged a starfish with her toes. The protruding dots on the body of the starfish are inlaid among the dark lines, like a black-silver bracelet from Southeast Asia. But the bulging silver flesh blisters are a bit creepy. Swimming is just because I'm afraid of the jellyfish, which hurts like pinpricks when I touch it, Rachel said. Julie smiled and said, "Hey, I saw it on the boat." On the boat coming from Hong Kong, she saw clouds of yellow mist floating in the water on the side of the boat. Why leave such a big open space? She thought to herself. Even if we don't build a dock or something, at least it will still be of some use. In fact, when she came here just now, when she got off the bus, there were Japanese jasmine trees clustered along the asphalt road, and piles of round and dense green leaves were piled on the ground. At dusk, insects chirped, and bursts of jasmine fragrance evaporated. A bottle-shaped white stone railing was exposed. I was already excited and felt that it must be like the seaside in South France. I don't know why, but when she is with her mother, everything becomes boring. Just sit here. Ruikyu picked a white stone by the forest and sat down. The mosquito bites were severe. I couldn't scratch my itch, but I couldn't help but scratch my calves. There are so many mosquitoes here. It's not a mosquito, it's a sandfly, very small. The sting was very itchy. I should have worn socks earlier. Should I wear socks on the beach? It took a long time to hold it in without catching it. Suddenly a person emerged from the water, and it was reflected on the blue-gray dusk sea. It was very clear at a glance. He stood up half like a white horse, with a bunch of black hair stuck between his eyebrows. Some white horses held a bunch of black mane in front of their foreheads. It felt obscene, perhaps because it reminded people of pubic hair. He raised his hand and said hello, and Ruikyu stood up and said to Julie, "Okay, you can go back." Julie stood up and responded, but she couldn't walk too hastily. She saw Ruikyu's 2 large rubber shoes dripping with water and her steps were unsteady. It was probably a young Englishman, standing in the water waiting for her. Did he drive her to the dormitory that day? Julie went up through the woods. She must have taken this opportunity to play for a few more days before going to her place. It was the last time, so she didn't leave yet. It's just a pity for her that she waited too long and suddenly felt old and miserable. I wonder if the people waiting for her will be disappointed when they meet her. When I went back that day, I rang the bell at the door of the dormitory. The train is high, and a sea light suddenly shines across the sea. It is aimed at the small cream-yellow pavilion and 2 pairs of bottle-shaped thin pillars outside the door. She stood in the shrine, bathed in blue light mist from head to toe, with a surprised smile on her face, frozen towards the other side of Kowloon. The bright light didn't move either. What did they think they saw? She was puzzled by these idiots. Then finally the light dimmed and turned away. A broad stripe of chalk gray, like the Milky Way, was drawn diagonally across the night sky, crossing with other stripes and running parallel to each other, moving lazily back and forth. But within a few seconds, the nun opened the door, and the interior was dark and dark. It was like coming back from a heart-wrenching movie, and feeling strange as if you had returned to your childhood home. Everything was smaller, shorter, and older. She was extremely happy. One day when she went to Repulse Bay, Ruikyu took her for a walk in the garden, and said in a low voice, "Let me tell you, something strange happened. Someone searched my things." "Who?" Julie asked softly in shock. "Isn't it the police station? It's happened more than once. The box has been turned over and everything has been returned to its original place. Tell Nancy and they still don't believe it. I can't tell that my things have been tampered with. Do not know why. I saw a single woman acting suspiciously and suspected she was a spy." Julie couldn't help but feel a little proud. Of course it's because she's mysterious, a dark-haired Marlene Dietrich. The most irritating thing is that these people are so afraid of things. Originally, we would have someone to take care of us when we go together. They know a lot of people. And Dr. Young is a doctor, so he can bring more things to do business. When encountering this kind of situation, you can tell the difference between people. Oh, she sighed with a smile. Julie was about to say that it didn't matter, that she came with Ambassador Bai, but she remained silent when she heard this. You should come less often these 2 days. This was after the 800 Hong Kong dollars. Asking her to come less often was exactly what she wanted. Then one time when she went there, Ruikyu was packing her luggage. She passed it round and couldn't get her hands on it, so she simply sat and watched. Here, help me tie it down, Ruikyu said suddenly angrily. She was packing the sewing machine and tying it with a rope, teaching her how to hold on to a knot and let go. The sewing machine was running like a calf, and it was easy to knock it over. Miss Xiangba came and sat for a while, speaking quietly and softly, as if she was afraid of offending her. After leaving, Ruikyu said, Miss Xiangba and the others are not leaving. She is getting along with Mr. Bai. She was going to find someone to get married to. They planned to live in Hong Kong. Julie still didn't ask her where she was going, presumably going by boat. Just because she mentioned that she wanted to find a destination, it was like hearing the wind and rain, and asked her to implement it. Lloyd seemed to have heard that she was in Singapore. She didn't mention the spy suspicion again, and Julie didn't dare to ask, so as not to make her angry again. If anything happens, you can go to Mr. Lake, who is also from your school. Do you know him? Hey, I heard that he teaches in the medical department. If there's nothing wrong, there's no need to look for him. After a pause, he added, just say I'm your aunt. Obviously not angry with her. Or is she still angry with Mr. and Mrs. Nancy and Mr. Bai for calling her cold? Especially now that Mr. Bai has Miss Youngba. He doesn't care about her. It doesn't look like either. If she was really jealous of Mr. Bai and Miss Youngba, she would not show it on her face, and Miss Youngba would be too embarrassed to look cautious for fear of offending her. Who are you angry with? Don't the young people at the beach help? It seems that people who meet by chance cannot be blamed for not guaranteeing them. And it doesn't seem to go as far as police questioning, but a secret investigation. There is Lake here again. It's not that there is no British guarantee, and he is still a university lecturer, but he is on summer vacation, so he may not be here. Julie didn't study it either. On the day of departure, she arrived at the Repulse Bay Hotel. It was raining heavily and the business car was full of people. She didn't know if anyone was going together, but they were all seeing her off. It seemed to make up for the indifference of the previous period, and she was extraordinarily warm, surrounding Ruikyu, chatting and joking. Ruikyu leaned out of the crowd and looked out the car window, and said impatiently, okay, go back. It seemed that she didn't want to see him off at all. She stood in front of the steps with a smile, waiting for the car to drive away, with water splashing on her body.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.